All right, everybody, welcome to this meeting of the Boston MPO Unified Planning Work Program Committee meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. First, I will read the virtual meeting guidelines and accessibility statement, and then we'll do introductions. So this meeting, all participants will join with muted microphones. Please rename yourself within Zoom to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants can mute and unmute themselves at any time. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen. A window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom or the reactions button in the toolbar. And I will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Srilekha Murthy via the chat box or via email at smurthy, that's smurthy @ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3705. Now read the accessibility statement, which states that this meeting is being recorded. The meeting is also accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in the meeting, please contact Srilekha Murthy via the chat box, via email at smurthy@ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3705. We'll now move to introductions, where I'll just call the roll here and we'll make note of any members present. My name is Derek Cravat, representing MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning, chair of the committee and manager of MPO activities at MassDOT. And I'll just go down the members list. MAPC.
Hello, Eric Barrasso with MAPC.
Eric. Town of Arlington.
Daniel Amstutz with the Town of Arlington.
Daniel. Boston Transportation Department. Not seeing anyone. City of Framingham. Framingham. Town of Medway. City of Newton. Town of Norwood.
Hi, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood. And I apologize, I'm going to have to get off at about 3:20 today.
Okay, no worries. I also see Steve Olenoff here. Is that an alternate?
Yeah, Steve Olenoff, so I'll fill in for Tom when he leaves.
Perfect, sounds good. City of Somerville.
Good afternoon, Tom Bent, City of Somerville.
And RTAC.
Leonard Diggins Advisory Council here.
All right, sounds good. So I think with that, we do have a quorum, which is good. And I believe I got all the members there, so we can move on to the next agenda item, which is summary of the, public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a comment at this time? All right, seeing none. If you do have any comments during the meeting, please use the raise hand function and we'll call on you. The next item is the May 12th, 2022 meeting summary approval. So let's ask for a motion and second to approve the meeting summary for May 12th. Daniel?
I'll make a motion to approve with just a brief edit on page 4, 3 paragraphs down. My last name is spelled incorrectly. The beginning of that paragraph. Just correction.
Sounds good. Thanks, Daniel.
I'll second that motion
Second.
with Daniel's correction.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Any comments or questions? All right, seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mass.otp votes yes. MAPC,
Yes.
Town of Arlington,
Yes.
Town of Norwood,
Yes,
Town of Westwood. Oh, I guess that, sorry about that. I think Tom's vote will count for the Trick region. I'll go to the city of Somerville. You there, Tom? I think you're on mute. All right, move along to RTAC.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Oh, sorry about that. Yes.
okay, no worries. Thank you. I think that motion. So with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is universe of proposed studies for federal fiscal year 2023. So I know that staff has gone back and analyzed some of the survey results to discuss that here today. And I'll turn it over to Srileka and Sandy to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you all for coming on a Wednesday afternoon, and it's not our usual meeting time. So today we're looking to discuss and process the results from the survey that was disseminated to both committee members and staff, and develop a final list of studies for inclusion in the universe of discrete studies. So to recap, we sent out a survey. We had 8 staff members complete the survey and 7 committee members. We ended up choosing a method of ranking studies, and to obtain these rankings, I calculated the average score of each study based on the selected rankings by each person who filled out the survey, and used the average to develop a final suggested list. So for example, here is the average staff ranking ordered from highest to lowest. And here is the average committee ranking ordered again from highest to lowest. So based on these 2 lists, staff met last week to discuss which studies should be included and which should not. The main criteria that we use to make a decision were capacity, feasibility, timing, and repetitiveness. So for example, staff decided not to include Project T3, Opportunities for Bus Rapid Transit in the Boston region, to allow for the impacts of the MBTA's bus network redesign project to really be seen before CTPS embarks on its own study. Some studies may be beyond what staff have the capacity to conduct, or what can be feasibly completed within 1 fiscal year. And we also do have to be conscious of whether similar studies are being conducted by partner agencies, and how results of potential studies we conduct might contribute or repeat results of other concurrent studies. So based on these criteria and these kind of framework, we developed a staff recommended list of studies for inclusion in this year's universe. And I'll read them out. We've got M1, Lab and Municipal Parking Study, TE3, Assessing Mobility Options at Affordable Housing Developments, TE4, Regional Freight and Infrastructure System Study, which is what we're calling the Chelsea Freight Electrification Study. That was the title of the survey. This is a bit of a rework. T4, Funding Free Fares, Possibilities of Eliminating Fares with Value Capture. A1, the Shared Use Path Guidebook. T2, the Transit Modernization Program. A3, Updating the Bicycle and Pedestrian Count Database. And TE1, Analyzing the Environmental Justice Impacts of Congestion Pricing. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm not sure what happened here. In my presentation froze. So at this point, at the very least, I'd like to ask members to share their thoughts on including projects TE1, and which was, just do this. I'm sorry, my computer just froze. On project TE1, which is the equity analysis of demand response transit in the Boston region. and T1 flexibly fixed bus route service. Staff wanted to request committee input on these projects as we couldn't necessarily come to a conclusion whether these should be included or not. As you kind of saw from the rankings, there wasn't much, there weren't many sort of extremely strong or negative opinions toward a single project. A lot of the scores were between the 3 and 6 kind of range. And we didn't have any outliers, either very positively or very negatively. So we are looking to the committee for guidance. At this point, I'd like to open it up for a discussion. And I'm going to stop the share really quickly and fix my presentation.
Good. Thanks, Rebecca. So the two you're looking for input on are the EJ impacts of congestion pricing and flexibly routed transit service one. Is that correct?
It's the equity analysis of demand response transit and flexibly fixed route bus service.
Okay, so 3 studies that you're looking for that input on. Okay.
Just the 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so there's flexibly fixed route bus service. And isn't equity analysis of demand response transit a separate study?
Yes, so there's only 2 that we're asking for.
Okay. You didn't say congestion pricing was one that you were looking for input on. Is that right? I thought you said it, but okay.
Yeah.
So just input on those 2. Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. Okay. Did you have a comment, Lynn?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, I like the flexible route, fixed route one, because I think that will also fit into his capture the interest of people who rely on regional RTAs a fair amount. So I'm not verbalizing this very well, but let's just say I'm in favor of the T1. And if I need to explain more, come back to me and I'll have a better explanation for you. But mainly it's just that I think a lot of folks who do work with RTAs would appreciate this.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, Daniel.
So I think I'm a little confused. So these 2 on the screen, TE2 and T1, are not part of the recommended list that you showed a minute ago. Is that right?
Yep, correct.
So are you asking for commentary on this to see if either of these should be included? Like, is there enough budget to include one of them but not both?
I guess the question is more, would the committee want to see either of these studies? It wasn't necessarily a discussion on budget that prompted us to want to ask the committee for their input. It was more of just, is this a topic that the committee has interest in studying that you think would fit in with the MPO's sort of priorities for the next year?
Okay. You can go on to Tom. I'll think about it.
Daniel, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I did have to step out for a second, and so maybe I missed something, but I got to be honest with you, I'm really confused right now. It could because the rankings kind of went by really fast, and where we didn't get them in advance of this meeting, I'm kind of at a disadvantage. I'd like to see that how the MPO members rank these again, and then I thought the second slide was what you wanted us to comment on. So again, yeah, okay. So yeah, I would have liked to have gotten this ahead of time so that I would have had time to kind of study it and take a look at it and compare. Because when we sent ours back, we gave you some detailed comments on each one of them, like why we didn't rank it and that. And I don't know how you took that into account. So it would have been good to get this ahead of time. All right. Because now it's just a little hard to look at because I'm and I don't want to take a lot of people's time. But I would, if possible, if that could get emailed out to us, that would be great to have. So then the next slide, which was the ones that I thought that how the staff ranked them. Do you have that slide? Okay, so that's, so are these ranked by, 1, 2, 3, 4? Or is that how they're ranked?
So the survey we sent out was, we asked you to rank from 1 to 8. So, yeah, this would be on a scale of 1 to 8.
So TE-1 is your number 1.
Yes,
Okay,
in terms of staff ranking.
all right, so I just want to. Again, I'm only gonna say it one more time. Would have been good to have this ahead of time. Then M1, E3, TE2, T1, T4. Okay, then the last slide I want to look at is the just the two that you want. So these two that you want us to comment on, what's the reason why you want us to comment on these ones?
So like I said, when we came up with our recommended list, these were two that it wasn't necessarily that they scored the lowest, but it was two that staff were unsure of including for a variety of reasons. And we were looking for committee input and whether the committee had a strong sense one way or another to include it or not.
And that was T2 and TE1. Am I, or am I not? No. What were those two? Sorry.
TE2 and T1.
Okay, so TE2 and T1. Okay. All right. All right, thanks. I just wanted kind of to clarify that, and I wanted to see how the ranking was, kind of to compare how we ranked them here. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Sandy, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say very briefly, and I've been in and out of involvement with the UPWP process this spring, but we will provide as much of the detailed background information as we can. And I think Lake is putting it up on the screen right now. This is akin to the tables that I've done in past years. But really what we're looking for now is, we've had our meetings to develop our staff recommended list. And what we need from you is to take a look at the staff recommended list and say, here's what we think should be added to it. Here's what we think should be taken out, if anything. And I think we're starting with that question of, well, we didn't have that many concepts this year in the universe. And so we've identified the two that are in that range where they weren't necessarily the top priorities for staff, but the committee had expressed some interest in it. And those are the priorities to discuss. And then we can kind of go from there, if that makes sense. But again, ultimately, the list, the authority over the list of studies that gets included in the UPWP is yours. You do not have to adopt the staff recommended list. That is simply, our recommendation that we've developed, taking into account CTPS's upcoming resources and the work that we know is going on elsewhere.
And Sandy, just let me interject, and I understand all that. All I'm saying is it would be, usually we get some of this information ahead of time. So it gives us a chance to kind of digest where everybody else was, right? And then where staff was, and kind of compare the two, because sometimes when I see where, hey, we might have been not even ranking something, but everybody else did rank, that might make us like, oh, hey, wait a minute, let's think about this again, and we, we didn't have that chance. That's all I'm really getting at. I'm just used to getting the rankings and stuff ahead of time so that I have a little chance to digest it and kind of see where we're going.
Yeah, for sure. And we will try and make that up to you.
Okay.
All right. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with Tom. It's kind of hard to do this right now, but what we also really need to see is our rankings that we sent in side by side with the staff rankings, so we can compare them and get an explanation of why the two differ and why, we might have chosen something and the staff didn't, or the staff chose something that we didn't. And now you really need to see those two rankings side by side in order to see that and get an explanation of why.
Yeah.
And obviously you can't do that right now.
Thanks, Steve. Sandy, did you want to respond to that, or was it a different topic?
Oh, sorry, I can take my hand down now.
Oh, okay, no worries. Daniel.
Thanks. So I guess just sort of building off what Steve and Tom said, and what I was asking earlier was, I mean, I think all of the, I think going into that, we understand that all of the proposed studies or the possible studies had some merit to them. So that's why I was sort of asking about the budget piece of it, because, well, we know that these different studies have different costs associated with them, and we can't fund everything. So that's what I was trying to get at, was like, well, is the discussion meant to be about, you would want to include these other studies if there was money or something, we were swapping something out. So that's also the piece of it that I think is kind of missing here, is like, how much does this all amount to, or, so, and I don't really, and clearly, so there's a little bit of a difference between, I guess, the member priorities and sort of the staff or staff priorities. And so I guess there was some question about these other T1 and TE2, I guess, and I don't quite, I'm not sure what the issue is with them that we're asking to comment on. So again, I don't know if, like, well, we're not asking we're not asking to be comment on, like, sort of as a whole, but just on these two. And so that's where I don't understand, like, what, why just those two that we would talk about. So that's another piece of it.
Yeah, I also, I think it would be helpful to kind of see if it's possible to have some sense of what the overall budget is, how much funding is left for these discrete tasks, and really think about this in terms of trade-offs. Like, when you select one of these studies, for example, what's being kind of not being done in its place. I think that would be a helpful piece of information to have for this group to be able to then kind of prioritize, because if we're doing one of these at the expense of, an additional corridor study that might be, really important, like, I just want to make that clear. So I agree, and I think that would be useful. So I also want to think about timelines. I don't know if Sandy or Srileka, you could talk a little bit about when we need this finalized. I know on the website there's a July 7th date for the committee reviewing budget implications and finalizing the list of proposed studies. Is it possible to develop some of the additional material that, some of the members have been asking for between now and that date to maybe kind of revisit some of these?
Well, I can answer at least the budget portion of that question for now. Unfortunately, we do not have our budget numbers in front of us. So we aren't able to discuss the universe alongside a budget at this point. In terms of finalizing the universe by July 7th, I think that's something Jonathan and I might need to discuss in terms of the timeline of finalizing the overall UPWP, because we were aiming or are aiming to bring the document to the MPO board the 7th of July. So if we are moving discussion of the universe or further discussion of the universe to July 7th, then that's going to move the timeline back a little bit. So I think that's something I'm not sure the exact answer. If anyone else wants to jump in here.
I can just jump in briefly, which is to say that, Derek, the timeline was based on the discussions that you and I had last fall about when was the last possible time to get the UPWP finalized. And I think you had indicated at that time that the OTP, you really wanted it to be done and signed off on kind of by the beginning of August, so that we could you could get it up to our federal partners during late August or during September. So if you have any flexibility, obviously that would be helpful to the whole process. But if we do need to stick to that timeline of getting it out first week in July, having the comment period, and then coming back first meeting in August to endorse it, then of course, that's what we've been planning on all along.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I might be able to ask about some flexibility and see if there is any flexibility on the dates. Obviously it just needs to be ready before October 1st, which is when the contract is going to go into place. And we just need the buffer time ahead of that to get it finalized. So I'll do some thinking on that and let you know anything on timing, but go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. So the first one is what was the rationale behind not ranking all of the proposed studies? Because we only ranked like 8, I think, of the 11, 12, whatever.
My goal there was really to gauge like how strong survey respondents' opinions were towards a specific study. Ranking all 12, I guess, could have also done that, but I was really looking to see if there were some studies that spoke to respondents more than others, just kind of across the board, across anyone, both staff and committee members, to see if there was, one or two that really piqued people's interests.
Just asking, I'm not challenging it at all. I do find it curious seeing that one of the studies that I think, is it TE3 that you're asking us to? Well, anyways, I find it interesting that one has like four, no one ranked it, And so the other question, because I was looking at the difference between staff and then members, meaning board members. Is it possible? So how many staff ranked?
We had 8 staff
8
members,
staff, and it seems like 7 non-staff, right?
7 committee members.
Yeah, 7 committee members. Is it possible for us to see the distribution of staff rankings?
I think in the past we've kept that sort of anonymized.
I want to know who. I just wanted to see the distribution of them, because it'd be interesting to see if some studies had more consistent high. Okay, no problem at all. All right, thanks. One way to kind of get at that would be to maybe give us some variation numbers, although I know the ends are pretty low on that. But anyways, thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. So just going back to the sort of the original question, Srileka, that you asked us about the two studies, I would be in favor, if we had to choose between these, of putting more focus on the equity analysis of demand responsive transit in the region. The fact that I think federal DOT is sort of wants regions and MPOs to have a focus on that, and I think it would be in the cost of it, I think was pegged at about $20,000. So it doesn't seem like it's a huge body of work. I think it would be very interesting to understand, are we, as a region, are we missing certain areas? Looking at data and demographics, are there gaps? Over the past 2 years at MAPC, we've been running a program that's been funded by Mass Development for a taxi program. And this is the piece of the Uber and Lyft TNC fees that basically go to support the taxi industry. And we have been running a portion of actually a statewide program to provide taxi trips. It's a grant program, and we also have seen some kind of interesting demand for certain services. So I think there's a nice data source there too that could be looked at, and some of our public health staff are interested in exploring that. So I would I didn't score that one. I prioritized other things ahead of that one, but that would be my input there. And then I have a lot of questions about the fair free value capture study, because I've done a lot of research over the years into value capture as sort of a transportation finance tool. And I'm not really sure, like, I still don't understand what that would be exploring, and whether that would be focused on like presumably like the role that new development could play in subsidizing fares. So that's one I just have like a whole ton of questions about. And I certainly don't want to, cast shade on the idea of like researching, what we could be doing for fare equity, innovative ideas. But I look at that and I think, like, I don't know where that would go.
Eric. Did anyone want to respond to that, or I don't know if.
Unfortunately, I don't know all of the technical aspects of value capture in transportation finance. And I'm not sure if any staff are able to answer that question here. But if not, I can definitely put you in touch with whoever submitted that study if you wanted to speak with them directly, Eric.
I'd love to do that. Absolutely. Yeah. And it might be that there's like, I'm kind of missing the kernel of the idea in the, again, it's like a very short paragraph description here. Traditionally, the concept of value capture is that you have land that is not very accessible by transportation. And so whether it's a new public transit station or even new roads, like for example, the city of Somerville, they used a form of value capture to fund internal roadways at Assembly Row many years ago. Like they implemented that a decade or more a year ago. They used sort of a form of tax incremental financing, or district improvement financing is what it's called in Massachusetts. And so by funding that internal roadway, they created sort of the parcelization to then have development. So that's the concept of value capture, is like you have land, it's very inaccessible. You use either future tax money that will be generated, or in some states, we don't really do this in Massachusetts, but in some states they have the ability for the developer to, headlights are on a sensor, the developer to have like a special tax assessment that funds this infrastructure. And usually value capture is it's not something that's imposed on developers or property owners. It's usually like a partnership where they're like, yes, we would support it. But anyways, without going deep into one issue, I'd love to explore that one a little bit more.
Thanks, Eric. Tom?
A couple of things. I wanted to talk about TE2 and TE1 for a minute, but I also, when they went back, I wanted to ask a question. I think you asked us to rank 8, but it looked like you ranked 11. And I was wondering what the reasoning was on that.
It was taking the highest ranked studies. But at the same time, I think, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, it's that it's not that we were necessarily entirely relying on the statistics to make our decisions. It was a combination of looking at how staff and committee members ranked projects, as well as looking at what staff and committee members' priorities were. And how we determined that was through the discussions that we've had over the last couple meetings on the universe itself. So taking notes both from staff and from the feedback that we got from committee members on different projects. That's really how we made up our rankings.
Okay, thanks. Again, I was just a little bit confused by that. On TE2, I know it looked like we ranked this in number 2, and but again, we had a lot of questions on this one also. And one of the questions was, is this a study about ride service? And how does it relate to the changes proposed in the bus network redesign?
Right. So those were questions that I think we were also discussing and sort of debating as staff, which is why this is one of the topics that we brought here for input. It's that we weren't sure, you know, how this sort of would play into other existing studies on transit, as well as definitions or overlaps in existing demand response transit work. So this was one that we were also kind of unsure of.
And well, the other question we had was, we were questioning the budget because I think our concern was, is the intention of this to be a region-wide analysis? And whether or not the budget was large enough for that.
Right, and I think whether it would be a region-wide analysis would be left, we would still, I think, have to decide that once we develop a scope for this project if it was selected. And in terms of budget, again, that would have to be adjusted, whether it would be a region-wide analysis or of a very, you know, specific area. And that's still left to be determined in terms of budget.
But wouldn't we need to do that before we could approve this? You know, if we were going to go ahead with this, we need to know what the real numbers were, right?
That's true.
And then I think the last question we had on this one, we were wondering if TE2 could be combined with T1 to understand demand response transit in the region and how the RTAs and how RTAs or flexible fixed route suburban transit service could help fill in the gaps. So we would kind of look at a correlation between T1 also, and would that make more sense to kind of combine the two of them?
Okay.
Thank you.
Tom. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so now I'm confused on TE1. So Eric, are you in favor of it? Are you against it? Or you just don't agree or understand the description? Eric?
Oh, I was saying that I thought TE2 was could be.
TE2.
Yeah, I was commenting
TE2.
more about that one. TE1,
Oh,
I'm
TE1.
less the flexibly fixed route bus service. Yeah, I guess I'm from the description provided, I wasn't entirely sure, you know, what that was getting at, whereas TE2 seemed clear to me about what the goal of that was about.
But TE1, are you as you see what they're trying to get at? Are you in favor of that? I would have thought MIPC was interested in value capture.
Oh, you're talking about?
Yeah, is that in value capture? Isn't that in TE1 or?
No, I was referencing another study that the staff is recommending. That is T4 here.
Okay. All right. T4. All right. All right. I got some of these confused. But on TE1, it talks about congestion pricing and various means of congestion pricing. Now, last year there was quite a bit of discussion about this. We had public comment on this, that people wanted a study on congestion pricing, particularly because MassDOT was ignoring the whole subject. And at the time, I thought people were saying that let's look into that more next year. And so this is the only place I see any mention of congestion pricing. It's something that I think needs to be studied, especially it's something it's being done, the whole rest of the world is looking at congestion pricing and is being implemented in various places. MassDOT doesn't seem to be at all interested in it, yet we had a lot of public comment that said we should be looking at that. So is that what TE1 is supposed to be doing? And so where did that fall in the rankings?
Among the committee, TE1 you can follow my cursor, is
Yeah.
about here. It scored about 4.6.
Okay, so that's one that we're doing. That then, so am I, so that, is that something that definitely made the cut then?
So that definitely made the staff recommended list of studies.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so the description is a little bit confusing and needs to be cleared up, but I think definitely we want TE1. I think, yeah, T4 was the one where the, let me find it. That's the one where the value captured, and we had questions about that. And is that what you had? For the, so the T, yeah, so there were questions about the you know, as Eric was saying about the value captured concept and how it's being applied here, so a little confused, but no,
Okay. Oh, sorry, thanks, Steve. Were you finished, Steve? I think you muted. Okay. Sandy, I think you wanted to respond to an earlier question, is that right?
Yeah, actually, more of a general point, and I see Tegan has her hand up. Maybe she's about to say the same thing I'm going to, which is that I've heard the question of budgeting being brought up a bunch of times here, and I thought if Tegan or Hiral or somebody wants to kind of give a general update on where we are with the budgeting process and when the committee might have access to those numbers, I thought that might be helpful just so that everybody's on the same page about that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Tegan.
Yeah, I apologize. I will actually defer to her all. I think,
yeah.
I'm not sure if she's here on the budget question specifically. I think she's the best one to give you a detailed process update or sort of status update. And so I will allow her to do that. However, I had another high level comment that I don't want to interrupt too much the flow of the discussion around the content of the projects, because I think that really is kind of the key aspect of the discussion here. But I do just want to emphasize that, you know, I know we do these rankings every year and we show the results, but the ranking is sort of like one step and one part of the assessment of what actually makes sense to include in the universe. And I just want to remind folks that because it was ranked, this is not purely, this recommendation is not purely based on the ranking, because we do them in isolation of each other. You know, we're kind of putting our own personal sort of professional reaction to these projects when we do this. Some of you have consulted with other people at the city. So just in general, I just want to emphasize that the ranking, it's helpful to understand where folks gravitate towards, but we are also, of course, thinking about the budget. We're thinking about staff capacity. We're thinking about what makes sense to do right now in ways that this is what this conversation is helpful in sort of tying it all together, in addition to joint staff conversations that we have behind the scenes. And I also want to continue to emphasize that, you know, we call these studies, you know, something in this list. They do often evolve from what the original, you know, title is, as we really do refine the scope for the studies that get chosen. And that's because we haven't spent the hours and hours, you know, that it sometimes takes to sort of dig into exactly what the study should look like. So again, I don't want to interrupt the flow of like really discussing these, because I think that is the point, is to sort of talk about what does that mean? What would this look like? How much might it cost? We should talk about those things, but I just wanted to give that perspective.
Thanks, Tegan. Len?
Yeah, thank you, Derek. And so I'm certainly not going to argue, against Eric for T2. He makes good points for it. And I thought Tom's suggestion was intriguing, combining TE2 with T1. If that is possible, I'd be very interested in it. But I do want to advocate strongly for T1, because I really think the RTAs would benefit from this. It's an interesting notion too of putting these on-demand stops to play and getting us better maps of the RTAs and getting just RTAs in general more on people's radar. And so if it's possible to combine those two, then great. But alternatively, if we went for TE2, I would ask us to consider if there's something else that we could swap out of the proposed universe to get T1 again. So that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Len, could you repeat that suggestion, but with the names of the studies as well as the numbers?
Oh, more of a challenge, but actually, thankfully, I took a picture of the slides, on my phone. So, so TE2 is the equity analysis demand response transit in the Boston region, and that was the one that Eric made, I think, a good argument for. T1 is the flexibly fixed route bus service. So those are the two that the committee is looking for, that you're looking for committee input on. And I think Tom has suggested combining those two. I can see, why. I can see the reasoning behind that. If it's possible, I think that'd be interesting, and it would be nice if in combining the two, it costs less. I could see it going either way. But if we weren't able to do that, or even if we did, if we needed to swap something out of the list that we're looking at here, I would ask the committee to consider what we might want to swap out. But I really want to push a little more strongly for T1, that's flexibly fixed route bus service, because I think it would benefit RTAs and the people who use them more. Thanks.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Len.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, Tom.
Just, piggyback on Len's comments. I don't think I said it the last time, but T1 was our #1 ranked item, but we did have a question on that. We were wondering if it'd be good to understand if the study was what the RTAs had, have they asked for this type of study? Does anyone know? Okay, sounds like nobody knows. All right.
Can I ask a quick question, Tom? I'm sorry to interrupt here.
Go ahead, Len. Yeah.
So because my understanding was that 8 was your highest priority and 1 was your lowest priority. Am I
You know what?
am I remembering that correctly, Shrelika?
Yeah, I think I forgot that myself. Was that the case? Okay.
Yeah, correct.
So it was I'm sorry. It was our #1 priority, but it was the lowest. And I think the reason, I'm glad you said that, Len, because it was throwing me off too, because it's been a while since we ranked these.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just used to ranking 1 as the #1, you know what I mean? So it was
me
kind
too.
of the opposite of, so thanks for helping me with that.
No
So the
problem.
question's still there, though. Did the RTAs ask for this one? Because we did rank it out of, it was 8 out of the, it was the last one out of 8, but, and I think we probably would have ranked it higher if we were able to combine it with the TE2,
Yeah. So T1 was not submitted by an RTA. I believe it was submitted by staff. And I'm not aware that we received any RTA input on that study.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Silva.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the budgeting question that came up earlier. Harel was actually having technical issues, so she's not able to be on. In terms of the budget, we are in the process of getting inputs from staff, and we hope to have a draft by early next week, early to mid next week.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So it sounds like there's still a lot of, I guess, discussion. I wonder if it's worth compiling some of this information and maybe almost coming up with like a couple of options and having members vote on which preferred kind of suite of studies might be preferable, like one with these two combined and what the budget of that might look like, and then kind of totaling up the amounts, of each scenario, and maybe doing like something like a really quick turnaround on that, and just trying to get a sense of that after this discussion, because I think maybe this may have changed. I don't know if that would, I don't want to throw the timeline out of whack either, but I think it might be helpful to, now that folks have kind of seen the rankings, to maybe if some of this feedback is taken to go back and kind of rethink the priorities. I don't know if that's something that's doable, or if folks feel like they're ready to vote on the staff selected list, or if folks feel like they might need more time and to go back and vote. I guess those are the two options, right? We could vote on a staff recommended list that's been presented today, or we can maybe ask staff to maybe come up with like 2 or 3 options of proposed studies and have us maybe revote on which option is kind of preferable now that we've had this discussion and have seen some of the results. So how do folks feel? I know, Steve, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak to something else before we get into discussion on next steps?
Well, yeah, this sort of has to do with with the money part, because TE4 is really a freight study. Since we also have a budget specifically for freight studies, it'd be helpful to know what the MPO plans to do with the regular freight money this year, and how that would work in conjunction with this, and whether that's some money could be used for TE4 or combined or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, I would just say, I think we did discuss this briefly at the last meeting. I don't know what the freight budget's going to look like. I haven't seen those numbers for next year. But if we're going to pursue this study, it's going to be substantially beyond the scale of anything we've ever done with the freight program before. It would be beyond the scale of any previous freight study. So that's why we're listing it as, you know, a request in the universe, as something to be considered here. That being said, this is a study that is going to have many parts to it, and we'd only be envisioning the MPO funding through the UPWPO part of it, and that part can be scalable. So this one's a little bit flexible in terms of exactly how much money the MPO would like to put toward it.
Yeah, okay, so when are we going to make that decision? And because you want to kind of fit all this money together, we really do need to know the amount of money for the freight budget, the ongoing freight budget, and what you think it would be spent on this year in order to come to a decision on, you know, how much money should be included on this one. So I think we really need that to proceed.
Okay. So does anyone want to speak to the sort of, I guess, timing of when you would feel ready to vote on a, like, it sounds like folks might not be ready to vote on a recommended list today. Is
Can we
that
go
correct?
back to-
Oh, yeah, go ahead,
Can
Eric.
we see the recommended list again? So for me personally, I support all of these projects. The one I really question is number 4, which I already raised some issues about, with funding free fares, possibility of eliminating fares without capture. I'd love to just understand what that would entail, because I worry that very quickly that could be deemed sort of not feasible, with a little bit of, with someone spending some time going into that. And so I'd love to flesh that out a little bit and know if those other two, the sort of on-demand equity analysis and the other transit one could fit in here. And if that's the case, then that could be, that could be a potential list right there from my perspective.
Thanks, Eric. Tom?
One question on the staff ranking, where I forgot how the ranking was set up, 8 being like the number 1 choice and number 1 the lowest choice. How is this ranked? Is like M1 there like number 1 choice here, or did they even go there?
So for the
Like
committee,
it was, yeah.
yeah, M1 was ranked the highest, and And for staff, N1 was ranked second highest, for example.
Okay, yeah, so, and you go back to the other slide, the next one. It just shows, okay. So again, adding to my confusion, in my head right now, M1 should have been 8 as the highest ranked one, right? Am I following this
So
right?
this isn't rankings.
No, I
And I
know,
think I
but-
did, yeah.
Well, I know you're saying it's not rankings, but it is, because M1 it looked like it had one of the highest choices from in your chat. See, this is where, and again, I'm sorry, I am mentioning again, not having the other pieces in front of us, ahead of time is making it hard for me. I don't think I'm ready to vote on these today. I think I need to have that information that I can print out and look at, and then, take another look. I think once I have that, I'd be able to vote fairly quickly, but there's some of these items that you have ranked here that we didn't rank at all. And I'd like to have a discussion about that, to see why staff didn't rank them where. And then I want to be able to compare how the other committee members, rank those. Like I think you have TE3, rank here, and we didn't rank that one at all. And I'd like to see what the other committee members thought of TE3. You know what I'm saying? And I can't. It's hard to do it right now because I don't have it on my computer. I'm just looking at it when you have it, on the screen. Do you follow me? I'm just having a little hard time trying to. I always like to take a look at, where other people were on it. I really take what staff has to say with a huge piece of helping me make my decision, but I also like seeing what the other members of the committee are looking at also, and then trying to figure out where we don't meet, like why, and I think that's where I am right now.
Thanks, Tom. Daniel?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think I basically agree with what Eric was saying a couple of minutes ago in terms of the list. I apologize that when I did the rankings, I didn't realize we were only supposed to do 8. So I ranked all of them based on what I thought was, lowest to highest priority. So apologies if that made some confusion, because I know I ranked probably a couple of them 8, which may have been confusing. So, but I think, I'm in the same boat. I don't feel comfortable voting on it immediately. I mean, I generally like the list, but I agree with Eric's question about T4, about the value capture piece of it. And I guess, again, sort of understanding the ones that fell away a little bit more, why they fell away. And, I think you had mentioned maybe T3 about the bus rapid transit, about waiting for the bus network redesign. I think that makes sense, but I think just having that all in the same place, and again, ahead of time or in a document posted to the committee page or the day of the next committee meeting, that would be really helpful to have on hand so that we can have something to talk about, that we can see there. So thanks.
Thanks, Daniel. Sandy?
I mean, I can wait for committee members to finish. I see Steve has his hands up, but I was going to offer a kind of a concrete list of next steps for us to take as staff that I think will meet the requests being made here. So just let me know, Derek, when you want me to do that.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, go ahead, Steve, and then
Yeah.
Sandy. Yep.
So Trick did not choose TE3 at all. And that's similar to Somerville. And we just couldn't see what the benefit was, what the outcome was, and what it is. And it's also, 100 to 150,000. That's a lot when we're not sure what it actually would do. So yeah, I think we need discussion on why is TE3 given such which it's your second priority on the staff recommendation there. So I would want to know why and what we're going to get out of that, because we just didn't choose that at all, and some of them didn't choose it at all.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and I do remember the discussion on that one last time as well was not the most favorable. So, so yeah, Sandy, I'm curious what you have to say about next steps. Maybe that'll
Yeah, sure.
clarify. Yep.
So I think the first thing is that Derek, you will clarify the timing and if we have any additional flexibility in this process. Then I think we can all, Derek and Leica and Jonathan and I can be in touch about scheduling a follow-up meeting for this committee, whether that's going to be next week or the week after. I think it sounds like there's a consensus that there's a need for another committee meeting before the meeting at which we ask you to release the draft UPWP, that there is a need for at least one more meeting. We will go back and create and present to you, posted in advance tables like we've done in the past that can contain the complete results of the surveys and have some comments from staff about why certain things ended up in the staff recommended list and why other things didn't. I think we've heard that request loud and clear, and we should be able to get that together without too much trouble. I think there's also been a number of questions specifically about the free fares, but also about the flexible transit study. So we'll make sure that we have some of our transit planning staff who proposed those studies on hand to discuss it. And as you heard from Silva earlier, we'll be able to have the budget in hand next week, which I think will help clarify a lot of these questions as well. And I guess, Silva, the question for you is, if we were to have a UPWP committee meeting, say next Thursday, I mean, not to jump on presuming anybody's availability, but just because that's the regular MPO day, do you think the budget will be ready by then? Yeah, I think that was the list of next steps that I had in mind. So, feel free to let us know if that sounds good, if there's anything else you'd like to see from us.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd like is some kind of like listing of potential, like this is one option for a recommended list of studies, but I think given the feedback that folks have had, there should be another option that combines the two that were up for discussion today and maybe removes the fare free funding one that Eric had an issue with, because and the one assessing of mobility options at affordable housing, just because it seems like committee members generally agree that those two have questionable outcomes. I think maybe seeing that as a separate option, maybe with the two that we discussed today included, because it seemed like those were of interest, and those two removed, might be, side by side with this one and what the cost difference is when we add all those up. I think having some kind of, listing options of studies that folks could, vote on might be another next step, so folks could have it seems like that would be a way to be responsive to some of the feedback.
So something more akin to like tip scenarios. I think we can do something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Eric.
I mean, you could do that. I mean, I also feel like you all staff have received a lot of feedback here, so you can take that feedback and take it back and think about coming back with another staff recommendation or a couple, or like, here's a staff recommendation and here's a couple other scenarios too. On that, I also just wanted to take a moment to say, Sri Lanka, thank you for your work on this, and I know you're getting a lot of like sort of criticism. This is a tough process, and it's even doubly harder 100% virtual. And I just wanted to voice some appreciation for staff for the hard work that you all put into this, and so I know this is hard sometimes, but just wanted to say thank you for your time and work on this.
Eric, I see Len is seconding that with thumbs up, and I agree. I think I appreciate the work that's gone into this as well. Go ahead, Tom.
Just on this, I'd be willing to meet whenever, wherever, staff can get this together, if it's, before our next meeting or, later this week or early next week. No way. And just to clarify, my comments here is this was just really difficult on our end, I think, here to try to figure out, how to go about it. I do appreciate all the work that's going in. I know you're short-staffed also on top of it all. So don't take it the wrong way. It was more, we're trying to make, really good decisions here. And, I think once we get to the next step, and I think some of the suggestions that were brought up today has helped me a lot. So I think it's been a good discussion. It just would be, once we get that information, I think that'll be helpful, and kind of go from there, so I do appreciate all the work was done, not trying to beat anyone up, it was more just in general that for me, to help me make those decisions, I'm just going to need that kind of info to put it together. Because, what we did in Somerville is, we had 3 of us kind of go through these, kind of really kick the can on all of them. And that's why we submitted comments on them. And I wasn't sure if we'd get replies back on those comments or not. I wasn't sure what the protocol was on that. So, and that might have alleviated some of the questions today also, but no, I do appreciate all the work that was done. And like I said, whatever works for everybody, we'll be there to, be part of that conversation.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I agree. And if possible, depending on time, if there is within that next set of documents or, scenarios or something, like maybe a summary of what the feedback was on that, or anyway, a revised version of the scope or proposed scope, that might be helpful too, to see ahead of the next one. So, all right, just in the interest of time, I think we can move along. Members' items is next. Did anybody have any items? All right, seeing none, we can move on to next meeting. So I think CTPS staff here and I will have to huddle about what the next meeting date, it looks like it was June 30th, kind of tentatively thought of, and we'll talk offline and let you know if that changes. Does that work for you, Strelka and Sandy?
Yep.
We can talk about kind of next steps, how long it might take to go about all the things we've discussed. So we'll be in touch on that. And I think with that, I'll ask for a motion and second to adjourn.
So moved.
Yeah.
All right, motion. All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, any objections? All right, without objection, we are adjourned. So thanks, everybody, and
Yeah.
we'll be in touch soon. Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Bye.